All right, welcome
I
again
lose
to
sight of my
this.
thingy every once in a while.
Just how does my intro go? Seltzer distillation, submarine still, drink alcohol and be happy. Whatever. Let's talk about Wheel of Time.
Let's talk about Wheel of Time, but do you want to start with comments? Because we had some good comments from last
Oh, I
time.
did, I did not know. While you're
Uh,
pulling those up, one of my meta thoughts early on, and this may seem odd, is that all right, so we're gonna do chapters 48 to 51 here. And I wanted to go into 52, but then I realized no, we'll have to stop in the middle and that stings. So let's wait until next time because the last part of 52 begins Matt and the Tower of Genji, and I was like, oh, you know what? Let's just wait and do that whole thing to the end. And we did some political meanderings here that you will see that will go up afterwards. Because the first chapter here actually there's some good stuff here, but it kind of sent me down political cultural lines, and I was like, let's leave that out of here. Um, but I actually thought that um, chapter 48 is a surprisingly good example of what we've been talking about with the economy of words and the necessity of good editing. Um, so we may start with that here. But you got the comments up.
I do. You want me to share the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from the last episode. We got Ideals back. Thank you
Hello.
guys for responding to the avalanche of my long-winded comments. I'm 33. Okay, we did ask his age. I remember that. So what is 33? Is that Z or millennial? It's right on the
See,
border, I
that's like us
think.
because we're kind of borderline
We're
between
borderline Gen X. We're
X
like the
and yeah.
last year of Gen X. Yeah.
Right. So and he's kind of borderline on the millennial and Gen Z there, I think, at 33.
Yeah. I had harsh reaction to Nynaeve the first time I read her, but the further I read, the more I came around to liking her.
Yes.
I actually learned from Nynaeve's stubbornness and it helped me grow, which is actually, that's great. That's awesome. At first, I was like, let them just go on with this magical adventure, but then I realized she wasn't who she was. She wouldn't be able to stand up to the Aes Sedai. Yeah, that's kind of I think where we grew into it, but
Yeah.
it took us another read because we were as young as you
18,
are.
19. Yeah.
Yeah, we were 15 years younger when we first read this. Yeah, 33 is a good age, man. I was
You were still
like
fighting at that point, weren't you?
7% body fat at
Yeah.
3%, 33. Yeah, uh that was a good time. That was a good time. Uh But yeah, no, our feelings on Nynaeve are pretty mixed, I think, where there was that like bite back, she's an authoritarian when we were young. But what we really figured out, I think, if I could speak for both of us a little bit, is how she complimented a good man.
Yes.
Because before we thought she was trying to control men. But as we grew up, how it was more of a this is a complementary role. But you also need to be a strong man to be able to deal with that kind of woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the yin yang symbol, so both sides need to be strong so it doesn't spin out of control.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that it wasn't, and I think that is also something you realize when you're older is it wasn't she was controlling because I am woman hear me roar. It is even though she's only slightly older than these people, they're kids and they're her responsibility. That's why she's being so controlling.
Well, and also we get insight if you really pay attention in the first book that she was I am woman hear me roar on necessity.
Because she's the leader of the women's council, and so she needs to be strong against the
Yeah,
village council and the mayor. Yeah.
and there was a covariant there with age as well as gender, as well as sex, I should say. Uh, so it was not that she was uh, kind of deemed semi-minuscule because she was a girl. It was because she was a girl, not a woman,
Mm, hmm
which
hmm
is
That's a good
another
point.
layer that we have to add to her going
It,
forward.
it's a good contrast between the sexual politics of the series and modern storytelling versus this is a real character
Hmm.
in a
And this
real
this
world.
this actually plays into the next comment.
Mhm.
Samuel's, you can call me Sam. It's okay. Uh, or only family calls me Sammy. So you can call me Sam or
or
Samuel.
Samo.
Yeah. Or Samuel. Yeah. Or asshole or whatever.
Please don't
It's,
call him Samuel in these recordings. You
you
can,
know, I'm going to give your brother credit for something. He was great when we were working at USA together. He would go, "My name's Austin, but you can call me Lampasas or Dallas or whatever you want." And for some reason, that got him more sales than anything else because everybody laughed at him right away, and then
he
they were
knows how to do
comfortable with
that.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like that he used Lampasas.
And it's
That was,
natural. That's the frustrating thing about my stupid brother is that for us, we would have to practice that to make it sound natural because that's not natural for us.
but he does. He just
He
does it.
just does it.
He's
Yeah.
just he's a natural salesperson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my remark on Matt's height, 5'11", according to Wiki. Yeah, I'd read somewhere 5'10", but 5'11" would be about right too. Uh, Reminded me how based and black pill I thought this series to be regarding male-female interaction. We've got the 6'6" Giga Chad Rand with every woman swooning over him, and then we've got Matt who gets some with a 6'2" or something Aiel Giga Stacy. Okay, I've never heard Stacy used with Giga, but okay, so okay, I'm not part of the black pill community,
It's a
even though
good way
I've
to think
studied
of
that a little
Melinda,
bit.
I guess.
Yeah. And you think, yay, victory for the short kings, but no, she was only with him because she was a dark friend. Okay, I'm gonna give you a little
Oh,
white
that's
pill.
harsh, man.
I'm gonna give you a little white pill here.
Uh,
You get a very massive hint that she hated what she's doing, why she's
yes.
doing it, because she actually
Yeah.
liked
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
She actually regretted trying to kill him at the end, but she was in the position where she was did we not get this from Black Widow a
Man,
little bit
you know
where
what?
where
That
she's
is ooh. I had not thought about that before, but that is a great contrast between Ingtar and Varen on the one side
hmm
and Melindra on the other side, who's almost there. You could almost see how she would break those oaths because she has been redeemed, so to speak, but
well,
then she can't quite do it. She's not quite there.
and as we reread that part, but we were so conscious of it because of what we're doing right now.
Mhm.
I actually read that into it that the only reason Matt's alive is because she regretted it. She hesitated. And the first several times I read that, I was right there with you with the black pill that she was only there because of that. But she really did hesitate. She had
She
the advantage.
she might have started there because of that,
She was
but
massaging his back. She could have put a knife through his heart at any second.
and I'm not entirely sure, but I get the impression they were together for 2 to 3 months, which is a long
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah, and realistically, no matter what your ideals are, what your faith is, or anything, you're still a damn human. And there's so many times that a Church of Christ boy falls in love with a Baptist woman and they are divorced 5 years later, right? Because you're human. It is exactly how it goes. And she was, I think the way Melindra was written is one of the best moments in the whole book series because he hated what he had to do.
Yeah,
And you could tell from the way she was written, even through his perspective, she hated what she was trying to do.
yeah.
And so that's where I have to disagree with you a little bit and actually add a white pill to it because you do see things that can overcome the height differential.
You know,
Uh, you're right in mostly that's the case. I mean, most of my friends are 6'4", 6'5", and I see exactly what happens.
he now granted she's a plant because she's a dark friend, but he initially won her over because of his skill. In now it was
Well,
boastful and he was being made fun of, but it was a game of skill that was being played and he won.
but also competence. He's the exact opposite of a narcissist.
He's
He
very
is
self-deprecating, yeah.
he's self-deprecating, but also he's just a competent person. And women have trouble with that because usually your narcissist is good at playing competent. That's why young women end up in these situations so much in respect to older women who actually find people who are very uh, able to go through with what they're doing, uh, because they're not good at judging that at a young age. She was able to judge it because he displayed it. He had just killed Cooladin.
Mm-hmm.
He was showing battle prowess in front of the clan chiefs. He was all of these things that would cause you as a female to fall in love with. And then I really got the impression during that interaction that she originally got in for one reason, but he proved that he was everything she wanted in that process.
Mm-hmm. But in the end, she couldn't go against those oaths to the
Oh,
great lord that she'd made. So she tries to stab him again at the very end.
yeah, and
You know?
and even we can lock this to another character, Carradine, one of my favorite characters, because you can tell he got into it for a certain reason, but he stayed into it
Mm-hmm.
for the fact that his family was being killed one at a time until he did everything they wanted him to do. And we attached the he's a super bad guy onto him, but this reread, I was like, he got in at a very young age where you're impulsive, and he regretted it the whole time, which is why he ended up dead because he
Yeah.
hesitated because of his regrets. And that's exactly why Melindra's dead. She could have stabbed him in the back while she was giving him a massage without
Mm-hmm.
him ever knowing until he was dead. And she didn't do it, and now she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, just like we saw in Carradine's head, there was no way she could not do it. There was some string tied that she cared about more. But yeah, to the text. Okay, so I did want to say something before we go. I wanted to do the comments first because Scott, you're not here.
Where you at, bro?
Yeah, come on, bro.
You
Okay, so
okay?
but I wanted to make a not only ask if you're okay, but I wanted to make a promise. One day, maybe we're big enough that there's too many comments to comment on. But Scott and Isomorphic, we will comment on yours every time because you were there when we were nothing. And that's the promise I'll make.
And still are.
And still are.
Speaking of worthless nothing,
No, Evian is not worthless. I love her.
well, see, I was gonna say, so I started this off talking about how the opening of this chapter, chapter 48, is a good example of economy of words and the necessity of good editing. This is page 712 in the first edition hardcover. Because uh hardcore fans of the story, and I don't know if any such thing exists, but there might be Avienda fans out there. I've never met you in my 20 years of being on the forums, but
I am. I love her.
I'm Avienda, I've said before, but Avienda kind of disappoints because I felt we needed more. We just don't know who she is.
That's not
You
her
know,
fault.
that's not her fault. But that first trip through the spires, that would have been interesting. And I'm sure some, the more hardcore fans would have wanted to see it, but it's also not necessary. So I like that the very opening of this chapter is her walking out of having gone through the spires and seeing what Rand saw, but through her own ancestors' eyes. That would have been neat, but we don't need to see it. It actually works better as a storytelling device if we just see her reaction to it and go, well, that was disappointing. I was hoping for more. I was expecting more. I needed more. Her feelings at the moment are much more important to telling the story, to pushing the narrative forward, than what actually happened in the spires. Because what really matters is what happens next when she accidentally changes the spires to show her the future instead of the past. In much the same way that one of the things Peter Jackson got a lot of crap for were his like the hardcore fans wanted Tom Bombadil, and to his point, look, I love Tolkien and I love the stories, and Tom Bombadil's cool, but the main narrative of this story is the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And Bombadil doesn't really add much to that. In fact, he's kind of a distraction to it. So we don't need him there.
Yeah, and even reading the original text, Bombadil did seem like a really wild, weird side story.
Yeah.
And then you get back to the regular story and it didn't matter. It was just there.
It was more about, it was because of Tom Bombadil that they were able to get to Bree unmolested, but you can get around that with the way that Jackson did it, of okay, they were able to get away and sneak off to Bree.
I don't
You
think
don't
Jordan
need that whole
did.
side story with Bombadil.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I only have a couple of thoughts on the first chapter 48 here. And again, I may be reading too much into this, but that's what we do here, which
That's the whole point of this. Yeah.
from the very beginning here on page 712, um, she's looking around the main square here in the middle of Ridine, and she's looking at the tree, Avendasor, the tree of life, the only known bit left existing outside of where the Green Man was, but I think that tree was destroyed.
Hmm.
Um, and she has this thought here. It was as the tree made her want to sit and bask in the simple peace of the moment. It was as if this tree were the ideal, the one after which all other trees were patterned. In legend, it was called Evanesor, the tree of life, blah blah blah. Okay. So the idea that the tree is just an ideal, that made me wonder, is if Jordan slash Shanderson are saying here, look, the song, capital S, and the trees, they're not coming back. They're an ideal from the
Mm.
past that have been lost.
So it's a direction, not a destination.
Mhm. And one of the things that kind of reinforces this to me is the next couple of pages where Avienda has this kind of, I think there's actually a term for this sense of loss for something that never was, this sense of loss for something that she never actually experienced. When you look back at something in history, and you feel this strange, whether it's empathy or sympathetic connection to this thing that you never experienced. The final episode of Ken Burns' Civil War, listening to the quotes from the veterans who went through it, and their feelings when this horrific thing that they had endured for 4 very bloody years is finally over. And there's this strange mix of relief, but also I don't know what comes next. This has been my life for 4 years. And on the one hand, I'm glad this death and destruction is over. But on the other hand, now what? And so there's almost this element of sorrow that this thing is over, even though the thing was terrible. And Ken Burns, one of the reasons he's such a great documentarian, is he makes you, the viewer, feel that. And so there's this connection that Avienda has with this thing that never was.
Yeah, in the same line, this is a semi spoiler alert, but it's not even close to what you probably think is happening. So it's just my thoughts. Uh, I almost wanted to see from the Tree of Legends and everything coming back, the revelations about the Aiel and where they're from, the ogre song, and all of these things, and then even the Tinkers, Do You Have the Song, is using the song to battle the blight.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we never get that. So there's your spoiler alert there, but we never get that. It's everything is conventional battle,
Yeah.
which with your thought on this is the ideal, maybe it couldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have loved to see all of these little threads that we've gotten for 11 books now, 12 books now, come together in the combating of the land is sick. The land is sick. We get a lot of that is going on, but we never get the correction to that, which I think could have been the song, could have been the Aiel understanding their original role, could have been the Ogier saying, "Oh, we actually have to fight for this land," where we got loyal fighting for them coming back to help out. Well, them coming back to help out as fighters, I mean, you're basically the Shanshan. You're the gardeners of the Shanshan. You're not coming back and fighting the blight, which is what you've been set up to actually be.
And I hadn't really thought about that, but these 2 chapters here, where you see the future of the Aiel and what happens when the Sanshin win, is the reason the Aiel lose is because they become what they're fighting, because they lose that connection to
Mhm.
why, and instead it's just the oppressive hierarchy of, well, this is just the way it is, which is what the Sanshin are.
Yeah, and it's a different manifestation of the order that is created by the oppressive system. So, not to sound like a critical race theorist, no, no, this is a different version than that. But the Shanshin, they have a very serious hierarchy.
Mhm.
You are this, you are that, you are the other thing. The empress comes from here, the emperor comes from here. This is how we do things, and this is the order, which we see the benefits of that from Matt's point of view, or
Yeah.
Rand's point of view, where, oh wow, everything is so much safer, everything is so much better than what I'm doing. But we also should see that the downfall of how that is with the Aiel hierarchy,
Mhm.
because everything becomes a weapon. And I think that's where the Aiel could have come into this is we are a weapon, we are the spear of this, and that's where we went wrong.
Well, we're gonna get to that, not today, but that's the entire point of these two chapters from Avienda's perspective, is setting up we have to find something new. We can't be who we were. And so if we're not who we were and you don't give us another focus objective, we become unmoored. And when that happens, oh, that's not good. That's not good for a person. And when you make it a whole society, you get Germany in the 1930s.
Yeah, which is I think where Jordan was supposed to be going, because I wonder, I got we're speaking out of turn because we don't know the notes.
Mhm.
But if the revelation should have been we actually go back closer to what we were before to fight the blight, and that's our best role when we're used to chucking spears. But they stick with the spears the whole time. So
Well, I think I, I I think the evolution of Avienda and through her the Aiel is set up on page 718 here, which is after the first flashback, flash forward thing that happens. And Avienda has this deep incredulity, this refusal to accept that these are Aiel. She doesn't recognize them at first. It takes a couple of flash forwards before I think she's smart enough to know what is going on here, much like the reader, but because she's in the world, not outside it looking in like we are, she can't accept this. Not at first, not after the first couple. She
yeah,
just, whoa, no, this can't be real. What is happening here?
which I'm wondering how much of this was Sanderson trying to imitate Jordan and how
Mm-hmm,
much of this was we want this moment to happen
mm-hmm.
in the notes, because it is basically a female version of what Rand went through when he went in the columns, because it was we're this, we're da 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 forward, keep going through these lives that aren't him, but
Mm-hmm.
seeing things from a different perspective. Which Rand's advantage was he wasn't Aiel.
Yes.
His advantage was, okay, this is actually a very reasonable point to go forward.
He,
Whereas
he,
an
he
Aiel
was
going to the
confused because
expansion,
he didn't know the backstory. So he was going, wait, what's this? What's going on? Whereas an Aiel would have been confused because, no, this isn't the thing that I had created in my own mind about where we came
Man,
from.
was it Mandin? Who was Kaludan's brother?
Mandarin, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was clawing his eye out, his eyes out by the end because he could not accept the fact where Rand's
Yes.
advantage was he wasn't Aiel. He grew up in the Two Rivers, which is actually more in line with the direction that everything went
And,
along
and,
with.
and,
And so
and that is again back to kind of my opening grump about we don't know Avienda well enough to really connect the way we did with Rand in book 5 because or book 4 when he did this because Avienda comes close to that line of clawing her own eyes out because she can't accept this, but she does, and that's important. And
But
that's,
she's
kudos to
right-handed.
her as a yeah, and that's kudos to her as a character that she doesn't want to accept this, but she ultimately does. And more than that, by the end of chapter 49, it's okay. This is what it is. Now, what do we do about it? Versus those who never make it out of the columns because they can't accept it, and that would have
Yeah,
been,
clawing your face off makes it life
yeah,
difficult, you know.
but that would have been more impactful if we really had a connection to Min the way we do with Elaine and Min. Though if we had a connection with Avienda the way we do with Min and Elaine, that this would have been even more impactful. So minor quibble there, but if you watch our political ramblings here, it I don't want to get into the too deep into the weeds of the politics here. It's just that Avienda can't understand this because she can't accept that. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but there's a Neil Ferguson has talked about this. Ben Shapiro's talked about this of a Harvard philosopher. I believe he's a philosophy professor that likes to open one of his classes with raise your hand if you would have stood up against Hitler in the 1930s,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
everybody
Oh.
raises their hands and he says, put your hands down. No, you wouldn't have. That's just the God's honest truth. You can think you would have all you want, but the numbers say, because you can think you're better than those people, there were good people then, and almost none of them stood up.
So the way I would have done it as a professor, if I was to have the same thought, is raise your hand if you would have stood up to Hitler, and then everybody raised their hand. And then the first exam where they told me what I wanted to hear instead of what they actually thought, I would have ended my grade with you would have not stood up against Hitler. Because I am in the same position as the professor,
Mm-hmm.
as the government is against the people during that time. And if it's very obvious they're just regurgitating back my words, I would have been like,
Mm-hmm.
you were not one of the ones.
Let me jump to chapter 49 to give you an example of what I mean, and so we can keep going here. So page 727. All right.
720.
Um, where is it? So Avienda is she's
That's another
going
chapter
through.
further, by the way. We're not
Yeah,
in the
so
same
we're into
chapter.
chapter
Yeah.
49 here. And um there's a very short blurb here in between flashes, and this is
God, what I would
Avienda
give for
thinking.
Avian to flash me.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um her, Avienda's tears flowed freely now. She felt like a child. Being Laudelin had been worse than the others, for in her, Avienda had seen hints of true Aiel ways, but corrupted as if to make a mockery. The woman had thought of war and associated with honor, but hadn't understood what honor was. No Guy Shane, retreat. There had been no mention of Toe. This was battle stripped completely of point or reason. Why fight? For Laudelin, it had been about hatred of the Sanshin. There was war because there had always been war. And this is the key line here. How? How had this happened to the Aiel? I don't remember who I first
No,
heard say this, but because children don't learn from osmosis.
I think Guy Shan are actually a spandrel, a remnant of ancient peaceful culture.
Mhm.
Because if someone brought up a weapon and you touch them unarmed, you become Guy Shan. And that seems like from the history of the Aiel, uh, what would have been a transition from never picking up arms to you picked up an arm, but I still touched you, versus you picked up an arm, I picked up an arm, and we killed each other. So I think actually the Guy Shan is a remnant, as a spandrel of the previous
No,
peaceful.
but that was her point in that moment, is that this person who I think is Avienda's granddaughter or great granddaughter, I don't remember which in the timeline here. I think granddaughter. Not only other, she doesn't understand the concept. She can't even fathom the idea of Guy Shane, which for Avienda is, well, that's an integral part of what Giotto is.
which might be a Sanderson flub.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that's
You
on
don't
purpose.
you think it's on
Is that
purpose? Okay.
no, that
I
that
just think it makes a lot of sense with the transition from a peaceful society to a war oriented
no, no,
society
no,
would be
but
there would
that's the
be a
point here. That's
yeah.
the point is that all they know is war. All they know is hatred. They cannot understand Guy Shane, and they think that Guy Shane are stupid because they don't understand that the war wasn't the point, the honor was the point.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why I think it's a remnant. You wouldn't purposefully have a system like that.
No, no, no.
And
But
yeah.
yes, yes, it was a remnant, but it became something that they used to illustrate their honor culture. And so now,
Yeah, but what
three
are
or
the
four generations away from Avienda, they don't understand it. They
well, that's
can't
what I'm
fathom
saying.
this idea of honor.
Where they came from creates the shame behind the system.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, the whole thing is based on shame. I was touched in battle even though I was armed, so I am obligated for this long, honor and obligation, right?
Mhm.
To do this thing. Otherwise, actually even am shamed more. So this remnant of a peaceful culture kind of bled into the current warlike culture, which actually makes things more peaceful because
Yes, and that leads. Was it? Where am I? Oh, I went backwards. So either here or the previous one. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was in this section of um that's why I think the line here is so important. Of Avienda had seen hints of true Aiel ways, but corrupted as if to make a mockery.
hmm,
So in and this is something that Avienda can't really accept, which is that in some ways, to your point, what Guy Shane were originally in Avienda's time, that was a mockery. That someone from the Jin Aiel, the true Aiel, would look at that and go, "You're making a mockery of the way of the leaf," because they were, but they didn't know that.
yeah, but memes follow culture and culture follows environment. So this actually is a very natural progression where they went from the wetlands to the threefold land where they could not be peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. Everything, well, it's like Australia for the Wheel of Time. Every snake and every spider will kill you. And by the way, you're going to be dehydrated, and also plants are deadly too. So, you go from the comfort of the basic utopia-ish Age of Legends to the freaking desert, to Saharan Africa with Australian reptiles, right? So,
Yeah.
you go to this one extreme to the other, but you can't help but hold on to things. But when you're holding on to them in a different environment, it may feel like a mockery because necessity says if you're going to live, you're going to be the exact opposite of that. But mentally, you're trying to hold on to tradition. And I think that can make it look like a mockery. And I don't think that this sequence kind of blended those things
No,
properly.
no, no. I see. I disagree because what you said there about tradition is that as much as I didn't like the chapter with Nakomi because I thought Nakomi was a silly contrivance and annoying, but what was good about that chapter was Avienda's own thoughts and her kind of evolution of recognizing that tradition for the sake of tradition is dumb. Tradition for the sake of perpetuating the values that created those traditions, that's important. And that is what she's ultimately realizing in these two chapters is I am, me the author, me the creator, me the pattern, whatever, are showing you rather than telling. So Nakomi was telling, and now I'm showing you what happens when you lose sight of why a tradition is important, why a tradition came to be in the first place.
No, that I agree with 100%. I think this is just an illustration of how a quick change of environment will disrupt that.
Well, that is a good point too, and leads to the last bit of this chapter in chapter 49, because you see in chapter 48 that the Aiel have forgotten how to live in the waste. And that's actually not that shocking when
Oh
when
no.
when you go into chapter 49 and you realize how long it's been since they were in the waste, and that they're under constant threat and warfare. But so when you get to the end of chapter 49, it would seem that they were in the wetlands for several decades before this war with the Sanchin really took off from skirmishes to full scale war. And it's not surprising, it's not inconceivable that then they would have forgotten how to live in the waste. And again, this is back to the thought of, I don't remember who I first heard say this, but children don't learn from osmosis. Well, actually, that's a little bit because they kind of do when they're little.
Yeah,
But then when they get bigger,
professionally,
you have to start explaining to them why you do the things you do.
yeah, professionally, it's a blend because you train your children, but your children train you at the same time. Yeah, you look at language. When
That's
a
the example I was going to use. Yeah.
Yeah, when a child learns language, they're not imitating you. Okay, so that's the misconception that we all have. You're teaching them because you're talking. No, they make sounds. They do the goo goo gaga, all of that. And then one day they say dada. And your reaction to them saying dada is what locks in the fact that you're dada because you react to it so much. And then mom is like, mama, mama, mama. And then the first day you say mama, mom reacts to it so much. And as a baby, you're just looking for acceptance. That's all you're looking for. Your brain is still processing that this wavelength is blue. And you're getting the feedback from your environment to what exactly is what. And so you actually learn language by the reaction you're getting from your parents and then your brothers and sisters and whatever circle expands out from there. Uh, that's not how we think of learning language when you're an adult. You're looking at the words, the translations, and you're trying to memorize those things. That's why no language is ever going to be as good as your first language because you've learned the first one through in a very exploratory process. Now with the Aiel, this exploratory process is 3,000 years. We're
Mm-hmm.
looking back at Babylon,
Mm-hmm.
right? With Western society. Because even Eastern societies broke off before then. So when we're talking about Western society, we're looking at Babylon. That's why you can't understand your Eastern neighbors sometimes, because there's 3,000 years of development in between. And with the Aiel, it's about 3,000 years
Yeah.
since they were the peaceful singing with the Ogier to the warlike desert uh nomad kind of population that they are, that we see through Rand's eyes, and then now we see through Avienda's eyes. In fact, I think the one of the biggest failings about those two sections, this one and the one back in book, was it 4 with Rand?
Mm-hmm.
They actually make it like 5 generations. I'm like, no, this was 3,000 years.
Well, it was like 5 or 6 generations through the breaking. The breaking is what Rand's visions were focused on.
Yeah, but even the breaking was 2,000 years before he was alive. Because what was Hawkwing, 1,000?
1,000. The
Yeah,
the
so
tr-
so
uh,
so
so it was
empires were already alive again.
1,000 years back to Hawkwing, 1,000 years before that to the Trolloc Wars, and then about 1,000 years to the end of the breaking from the Trolloc Wars to the
Yeah,
breaking.
I mean, isometric is 33. You're a little bit far away from 1,000 years, and I would assume Scott's probably about our age
Mm-hmm.
from the way he talked. So yeah, we're quite a bit away from 1,000 years of development, and look how much has happened over the last few years.
Well, that is actually a good point I meant to bring up in the previous chapter, which I think is interesting, which is Avienda's initial disappointment is not just that she already knew the answer because Rand revealed it. So there was no surprise here. But one of her bits of disappointment is how banal everything was. She was expecting something epic. She was
Mm.
expecting that the reason the Aiel took up the spear in the first place was for some epic, noble, honorable reason. And then
No,
she
it
looked
was
at
to
it and went,
survive.
"Oh, it's just a couple people who finally got fed up with their children being kidnapped and raped, and then they just kind of accidentally killed somebody."
Which is
What?
why I think Jordan was a true historian, because that was more like the revolution
But
than the
see,
dramatic stories you
exactly,
hear about.
because the
Yeah.
where the 3,000 years come in is that you have had 3,000 years to build this up in your own mind.
Hmm.
But that's not actually how it started. But you've
Yep.
had 3,000 years to build this up in your own mind,
Yeah.
which is
Lexington was just a few farmers. And
yeah, exactly. Which
yeah.
is why on page 730, I think these are two of the better written Sanderson chapters. And it may partly be because we just don't know Avienda well enough because Jordan, to his failing, didn't give us enough of her. But and so Sanderson has more room to work here. But I think these are two of the better written Sanderson chapters. And one of the things I really like here is on page 730 how he has been building this up, and then he finally drives in the last nail,
Mm.
which is here on um at the bottom of page 730 after, yeah, this is the second to the, so this is after the second to the last vision that she has had. "I don't want to go on," Avienda said to the empty forest of glass. The breeze had fallen still. Her comment was met with silence. I love that because it's environmental and yet it's impactful. It's, yeah, the universe doesn't care that you don't want to go on, honey. You're gonna go on. And this is how the world is and is going to be. Her tears had marked the dust by her feet, like fallen drops of rain. That creature, she's talking about her own granddaughter,
Hmm.
had no honor. She has ruined us. The worst part was the woman on Kala had thought of her mother's mother, her great mother. Inside Okala's head, there had been a face attached to that title. Avienda had recognized it as her own. That creature had no honor. She has ruined us. And this is where the final nail gets driven in, and especially after this last vision here, when Avienda realizes, you ruined us. That's your own freaking granddaughter. It is. We've talked about how hard it is as coach dad to watch your kid doing something when you can't. It's all up to them now. It's all out of your hands. So it's hard enough when you're watching them and you can't help, when you're watching them and they stumble and they fall. My gosh, can you imagine being forced to not only watch but be inside your own grandchild's head as they do something evil, as they do something dishonorable, which to you dishonor and evil are the same thing if you're Avienda, really.
Hmm.
And now you have to watch that and you can't do anything about it. How much that's got to cut you to the core.
But also, you have to go through the thought process of maybe I'm wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where this
That's
is.
why they're called wise ones, right? Because
Yes.
what is wisdom other than being able to analyze a situation and say, what does this mean for the future?
Mm-hmm.
Not what does this mean for what I did?
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean for the future is wisdom. Intelligence is what is the analytics of the moment. So it's kind of, you need both realistically to make the proper decision, but that forward thinking is what we call wisdom.
So on that note, jump a couple pages forward to page 733. And I had this thought. I was having this thought through this whole thing that kind of bubbled up here at the top of page 733, where now she's inside her own daughter's head. And and she has this thought, her daughter, Avienda through her daughter has this thought. One her mother had spoken of. What was it to be Aiel now that their duty to the past had been fulfilled? And so there's this thought of, there's a bit of a plot hole or contrivance here, which is, where the heck are all the people who would have stopped this? Where's Perrin? Where's Matt? Most importantly, where's Avienda while her children and grandchildren are making a mess of everything? Well, this is a much more solid potential future than the ring she originally went through, but it's still only a potential future, and it has answered a couple of sentences later, which is Tawan's dead. It's implied, and we don't know what happened to her, but she's gone, and presumably, therefore, so is Matt, and presumably, therefore, so are the rest of the
Okay,
people from this generation.
so we have two notes from the future books that were supposed to be written, but Sanderson decided not to. Matt's alive,
Yeah.
but he's missing his eye, he's a
Mhm.
beggar, and he's all of these things. Spoiler alert, by the way. Sorry, that was after the fact, but uh no, no, you're absolutely right. Where were all of these other people? And I want to say that when we separate the supernatural from the human in some of these things that go on, I think her thoughts about the future are actually influenced by what she knows now.
Hmm.
Because she can't know what Matt's going to do because she probably hasn't even thought about Matt in 6 months
That's a good
or
point.
a
Yeah.
year from now. She can't know what Perrin's going to do because she doesn't even know Perrin, I don't think. And
They would have
so
met briefly in the
in
stone,
the
but yeah,
stone,
she
yeah,
doesn't really
maybe
know him.
briefly, yeah. What the Egwene is doing, who she counts as a near sister, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So uh it's kind of a balance of what you can tell from the pattern based on the Turing Grail versus what the Turing Grail is pulling from her own mind. And I think that fills the
Mhm.
void of where the plot hole could be.
That's why I think this is such great writing, because while you're sitting here kind of at the climax of yelling at the page of, well, but what about this, what about this, and then it answers the question, and it is basically, so that there on 733 is setting up what happens a couple pages later when Avienda ultimately has this revelation, which is basically that this is the future unless you do something about it. So she has this thought on page 735 that I love, which is each step had seemed logical to the people who took it. Each step was perfectly logical in the vacuum, and yet inevitably led to this horrific doom for the Aiel people. So that one sentence does so much that in the moment, it, like I said, it answers the plot hole. It motivates Avienda going forward, which we won't see here. I think we don't actually see the culmination, the effect of this until the beginning of the next book. But it motivates her going forward, but then it also just illustrates why we started this, which is the Amazon series sucked sweaty balls. And I know all about sweaty balls because it's 100 degrees outside and I've got to go do
Well,
some work out there.
remember when we worked at Armstrong or whatever that was in
Oh,
Stillwater?
jeez.
I used to walk there
Oh.
from my apartment, and sweaty balls was just the walk there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I don't remember who I first heard illustrate this, but there's this storytelling mechanic, basically, this writing mechanic, which is you need to be able to justify and links between things that if a story is and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens, no, that's crap. That is a crappy story. No, this happens, therefore this happens. So that leads to this, which ultimately leads to this. Okay. Too much modern storytelling is just a sequence of events that happen because they're cool and fun.
Yeah,
That's not a
it's
story.
completely left-brained. It's I did this because of this. I did this because of this. I did this because of this.
Yes.
Where in the right brain you would be like, this happened, and then I reacted to it, and then I explored forward, and I triggered this other thing, which then caused me to maybe shift
Mhm.
directions a little bit, and then I
What,
triggered this other thing, and yeah.
whether on purpose or accident, Sanderson/Jordan is telling us here in a nutshell, this is how you write compelling and convincing characters. Because each on the outside looking in, you go, God, no, why are you doing that? And yet it makes perfect sense in the moment why that character is doing that, because that's a real person reacting to real stimuli.
All right. The last thing before a little bathroom break. That's why I like to live by the philosophy of I would have done the same thing had I been me at that time in that moment. And
Mm,
that's
mm,
not
mm,
that's not a cop out of I did that thing and I'm totally justified for doing it. No, it's a way to look forward because okay, so I did the wrong thing at that time. So let me figure out how to not be that same person the next time that moment happens.
mm, mhm.
And that's, I think, what Avienda is trying to do here. And what we see the best progressions in the books is what's happening. Perrin, in these recent revelations, which we actually enjoy after the slog, is he's trying to be a different person the next time that happens. Gallad,
Yes,
Gallad, we
yes, yes.
appreciate him now because he's always trying to be a different person the next time
A
that thing
better
happens.
person
Yeah,
under his
yeah.
rubric of what that means.
In fact, Gallad might be the best example
Yeah,
of that. And our
yeah.
frustration with the Gawain is he said he justifies by saying, I was that person in that moment and I'm still that person.
Mhm.
That's why we're so frustrated with Gawain is because he
Yeah.
continues to be the same child with the same mentality, right?
Mhm.
Elaine, she continues to be the same child. Egwene changed, but for the worst. She went through a progression and then completely became a different person. So that's, I think, on the people who are frustrated with her, like I am, that's what you get from it. Uh, Katsuane always tries to be better than she was before.
Great
Uh,
example because that's going to happen in a couple chapters here. Yeah.
yeah, Nynaeve uh, uh, regrettably becomes the better person, right?
Yeah.
But that's actually the most human part of it is because you
Yeah.
always want to be you, but you has to change to the environment you're in. And we can see it in real time that she's doing that. Very, what would I use? What word would you use there? Something so. She is getting there in the ripping the ground she was already in, but life keeps pulling her forward kind
Mm,
of way,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know? So that's I think why she's so identifiable because you do identify with traits of yourself. The problem is you don't know where they came from or why they're there and if they're adaptive.
Yeah.
And if you're very open, you adapt along the way.
Mhm.
But if you're closed-minded, you could just keep pulling on the thing that's actually downhill when you're trying to
Yep.
go
Yep.
uphill. Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right.
on to chapter 50. All right. So it's interesting that you bring up Elaine and Cadsuin as a contrast to Avienda here because the next chapter is Elaine. And then there's a short POV from Cadsuin in the final chapter we're going to talk about today, chapter 51. But the very opening of chapter 50, page 737, there's a line here at the bottom that just made me laugh and close my book and say, "Oh, geez," which is
Yeah,
that.
let me kind of go back to the comment from isomorphic
Mm,
for a second. Had that Elaine that Nynaeve grows on you. The reason she grows on you is because she's actually
mm,
open to doing things differently. She's very traditional in the beginning, but then the real world basically smacks her in the face. And unlike Perrin, she's like, oh, well, crap, maybe I need to do things differently. I'm gonna, you know, claw the whole way, like trying to pull back, but
but still maintaining my core principle of help the weaker,
mm-hmm,
help heal the sick. That's still her. She still maintains her core.
mm-hmm. Yeah, she maintains integrity at the same time that she adapts. And that's actually a big word, integrity.
Mm,
Integrity
mm.
is different than stubbornness.
Contrasted with the bottom of page 737 here, whenever some people thought Elaine Tracken could control her temper when she needed to. Wait, so um does that mean that all the other times you didn't, you were being a purposeful bitch?
Yeah. Or
That
does that mean everybody around you is wrong and you're right? Or, yeah, that kind of thing.
this was a big kind of flashing red light of again to my thought that I've had in this in this book and the previous I actually may have started talking about this in Knife of Dreams, actually, of wait, is Elaine supposed to was it intentional on Jordan's part that in the last part of the series, Elaine was going to stop being likable? That you're actively going to start thinking, oh, this isn't a good person?
Let me actually quantify that a little bit because I think you might be onto something. In when we first meet Elaine, we also meet Gawain and Gallet, right? And as the story goes on, Gallet becomes more likable. And Gawain and Elaine, who were similar in the beginning, are going down the same similar path now. Even though the transition from Gawain to going what he did in the last couple books to what he's doing now was at her expressed uh, uh, thoughts on the situation, but she's doing the same damn thing Gawain is doing. She's more similar to her brother that she was more similar to in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that was the supposedly bad guy in the beginning is the one that actually being consistent with his own thought process has become better.
Add to that again we tend to think there aren't accidents in the structure of these books, and the book before we had that moment where Avienda thought, what is it she thought, that creature had no honor. That creature was your granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And why did she have no honor? Why was she so villainous? Because she was so damn arrogant. Because I'm a child of the dragon. I'm special.
Mm-hmm.
People should follow me. I was born to lead. And you see the kernels of that in the last flash forward, which is Avienda's daughter, who is already starting down that road of everybody else's weaves are uncivilized, or what is it she thinks about them? They're awkward. They're the I had forgotten this, that Avienda's daughter never lets go of the source.
Mm.
That she finds it
And
odd that people think they can be seduced by that, and the source to her is, she compares it to, you might as well stop breathing, it's a part of me.
yeah, okay, so parallel that with her dad though too. Rand went under that phase as well.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, where he would fill himself with the source. And then he went into the it makes me sick all the time. No, and I'm going to go back to basically episode 1 of this reread. The power is like addiction. If you're an alcoholic, alcohol makes you feel like a god. And then you get so far where you're sick with it and you're sick without it. In fact, you start drinking again because you feel sick without it.
Hair of the dog.
And then you drink so much that you're sick with it, but then you try to get off of it and you feel even more sick. And so you get back on it. That's
Yeah.
why I think really I wonder about his history, but I think Jordan might have been an addict of some point because he writes it like it really is. And it's actually makes it more powerful to me because I can relate it to something. Uh,
Mhm.
Whereas the daughter, she's an addict from birth
Mm.
because she got or the granddaughter, I should say.
No, the
She
daughter too, because along with the she always holds
Yeah.
the source, is you normally, we know from the very first book that you normally start channeling if you it naturally, as opposed to if you can be learned. But if you are a natural channeler, it starts sometime after puberty.
Mhm.
Avienda's daughter thinks that she was channeling as a child for as long as she can remember. She's been
Mhm.
channeling. That's not normal.
And the way they describe channeling, one time when I was in the hospital after one of my heart surgeries, the pain was just so bad. And the only thing they're allowed to give you is straight up opium. And the nurse kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" And there was one point in it where I was in such pain. I mean, people don't, okay, so everybody can identify with this. There's like you get cut pain, and then there's tooth pain.
That
Tooth
nerve pain. Yeah.
tooth pain is its own thing, and it is excruciating, even if you're good at tolerating pain. Well, from my experience, every organ has its own pain.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I can't even describe what heart pain feels like because the only thing I could say is it's its own thing. And it's a very desperate kind of its own thing, probably because it's the first thing that makes you die, right? Yeah, it's
That's a good point because I have trouble explaining my headaches because
well, I was going
brain
to go into
pains.
headaches, yeah, because a
Oof.
migraine is
Yeah.
its own thing. A migraine is a
Yeah.
different pain than a cluster headache, which has a 75% suicidal rate. So if you get migraines, just be glad it's not cluster headaches, right? So every organ has their own pain and you can't describe it. And there's a pain with addiction that you can't describe unless you know. It's a screaming inside your mind that you have to satiate in some way, shape, or form. And what happens with a lot of addicts is they either go down a path that makes them dysfunctional, like you see in the streets of San Francisco or LA right now, or to southwest Houston, no, southeast, third ward, southeast, yeah, southeast Houston right now. Uh, and it's just something you don't understand unless you've been there. That it's not like, oh, I cut myself and it hurts. It's your body is screaming at you to make it right.
Mm, hmm.
And that's the way I read using the power with whether it's the female half, which would be like your Molly or ecstasy, or the male half, which is like cocaine.
I was about to say that's got to be cocaine. Yeah,
Yeah,
from
it's
what
got to
it's
be cocaine.
described.
Or yeah, but I remember the first time I had that opium, straight up opium. I was just like, I was in such pain that I couldn't describe. And I was like, just do it. I need to sleep. I got to just sleep through this
Yeah.
recovery process. And she said, okay, it's going to start at the top of your head and go down your body. And I remember when they injected that, it was about 4 or 5 seconds later because they did it right in the bloodstream. And I felt it. And I was like, never again. Never again because I already feel myself addicted to this.
Oh yeah.
Because
I,
this
well,
was,
I've talked about the anesthesiologist at the new place I go to for my neck procedures. He puts a bit of fentanyl in his cocktail,
oh, yeah, yeah.
and I'm like, holy crap! I get it now, and this is scary.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, I felt that and I was like, this is absolutely the best thing I've ever felt, which means I can never feel it again because I already want it more. And that was like the first hit. That was the first hit. And that's like 10 times less than heroin.
You know, Socking back to what started us here is again the idea that maybe Elaine is not supposed to be likable here in the later parts of the book. So
No, I don't think she is.
she has it
No.
from both sides because she has that physical chemical addiction of channeling of sight in, but then also the cultural physical addiction of power,
Hmm.
and she's always had that.
No, and this is one of the things that Sanderson actually, I think, kicked up to 11 from where Jordan was going, is you're not supposed to like everybody.
Mm,
Every hero isn't a great person.
mm.
You know, Elaine is like the Winston Churchill of this series.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like if you look at her personal thoughts and you look at her personal actions, you're like, "Oh my God."
Yeah,
But then
you
when you
look at
see the end result, you're like,
go
"Ah, okay,
I
yeah.
brought it up before because it's a great movie about a great person with one of the greatest actors of our generation, Gary
Darkest
Oldman,
Hour." Yeah.
Darkest
Yeah.
Hour, and you're
So,
like,
so
man,
I will confirm
th-
this recommendation. It is a fantastic movie.
this guy is
Yeah.
incredible. And then you go read the things that Churchill said about India and Indians, and you're like, ooh, dude, oh, bro, that's not right. Same guy.
Yeah, but I'd also add on a personal note for someone who's struggled with addiction is sometimes all those good traits wear you down so much
Mm,
that you revert to let me be comforted for a moment.
mm.
And that's a real thing too.
You
And
know,
I think
this
that's
is,
also where I would say Churchill should be a little bit more justly uh,
yes.
uh,
Well,
judged on
that's
this.
an interesting point because the only other note I have on this chapter is my first note is the first page and my last note is the last page, which is on page 745, the very last sentence of this chapter. She, Elaine, smiled at the warder, but knew that Brigitte could sense her nervousness.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most human Elaine has been in many books. And that was, I was kind of going back and forth here of, does that invalidate what I was thinking about Elaine not being likable, or is it just this, no, she's still human. She's still a person.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of my concerns with that idea of Elaine Tracken could control her temper when she needed to, that is the kind of chuckle hut BS that a modern writer would implement to make you go ha ha ha, to make a character likable. But then you realize, no ha ha ha. What that person is thinking and doing is terrible. The most recent example is the awfulness of the Acolyte. If you go and you watch some of the plot summaries of the Acolyte and you go, that person's supposed to be the hero. That person's supposed to be sympathetic. That no, that's not laughable. That's awful. Everything this person does is awful, but you clearly think I'm supposed to laugh and feel connected to this character, and no, the hell I don't.
Yeah, and no, I'll say the opposite of that is it's actually a German production, and it's so well dubbed that you actually have to really pay attention to the lip movement to notice that it's dubbed over in English. Is the Freud uh,
Mm,
uh, miniseries, because you can see that pain that goes with I want to help everyone, but there's no one to help me. So I drink
mm,
some more cocaine. I drink this. I do this. I go to that, psychedelic thing, and I fall into the woman's arms. That was one of the criticisms of Freud is he took on a certain clientele that on the female side was mostly borderline personality because that was the whole era of histrionics versus this or whatever. And they're very good at manipulating people. And he cared so much. And his biggest downfall was he would keep falling into that trap. And he would medicate himself to get over it. So you see that, and they did a really good job of putting that forward. And you see some of that with Perrin. Perrin's very agreeable when it comes to Fail. Uh, but he's so conscientious about what the world should be that he's driven into these two extremes in his mind,
mm.
where Rand is super conscientious, but a little more open, and those conflict each other sometimes because the way things should be, but the way things are, and now you're seeing both, but that's kind of counterintuitive to
Well,
some degree.
speaking of which, that gets us to the next chapter because the next chapter is
Yeah.
Rand, although it is Min's point of view still, which
Which Min
uh,
is super open. She's the
yeah,
most open character other than Matt, maybe, in the series.
I hadn't thought of that, and I think that may be another moment of, did Jordan know this or did he understand it intuitively?
Well, and what he did really well, and Sanderson did pick up on a little bit, is the contrast between having an open mind versus being molded by society. And the great example is Nynaeve. She didn't make the changes she made in her mindset without being open.
Well,
But
but
she's
but
super
yeah,
conservative.
to drill down on that point though, specifically, my point was, it's interesting that since Rand's transformation at the end of the last book, we have not gotten a Rand point of view, and it's kind of annoying. But it is interesting that most of the point of views we do have are from Min. Most
Well,
of the Rand chapters are Min's point of view.
Rand is the shark in the original Jaws,
Mm.
where he's most interesting because you actually don't know.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is interesting and perhaps not accidental that most of those points of view are Min.
Mhm.
You have a little bit from Nynaeve, and then you also have a little bit from Cadsuan. Whenever you have a Rand chapter, it's mostly men. There are a few Nynaeve, and then like here, the last part of this chapter, it switches from Min's point of view to Cadsuan's point of view, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Which makes me really, as we talked about earlier in this, makes me really feel bad about characters like Melindra, and I think Jordan did that on purpose. Uh,
That you don't actually know what's in her head. You have to,
exactly, yeah.
it's just supposition.
But at the same time, I take all the data that was available to me. She could have killed him at any time. And she
Yeah.
hesitated in killing him when the moment happened. And you
Even
have to
right there
wonder
at the very end
why.
where she
Yeah.
takes that last stab at him, she doesn't just boom stab him.
But no, no, no.
She
The way the scene is
says
written,
something
she
to him.
does it in a way that allows him to defend himself.
Mm. Because she
Because
talks
she,
to him first. Yeah.
yeah, and I actually wonder if she was at a point where she would rather die than do what she had to do.
Mm.
And that's that's where I the main reason I love these books is the complexity of character is actually human.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so like at the very beginning of this chapter, page 747, there's this great moment here that it makes me kind of annoyed that we're not actually inside Rand's head, but to your point, it works better because we're not, which is when Cadsuin, calls him a dingleberry and he just says, "Your objection is noted." Like, I love that. Uh,
Which would have a different uh kind of hit to it had he still been the same as he was a book and a half ago.
well, but then you add to that,
Yeah.
then a little bit down the line here, or I think it's on the next page. Yeah, it's on the next page where he finally lets. I this is one of my favorite moments in the whole series, and so kudos to Sanderson for writing this, which is uh on the top of page 748. Rand interrupts Cadsuin. Cadsuin Sedai, Rand said softly. Your net has a few ornaments I don't recognize. I suspect it is a breaking era creation, but I was there when the first ones were designed, and I wore the original male version. The room fell silent. Well, boy, Cadsuin finally said, Are you ever going to give up that affectation, Cadsuin Sedai? Rand asked. Calling me boy. I no longer mind, though it does feel odd. I was 400 years old on the day I died during the Age of Legends. Let me just whip this out and flop it down on the desk here for you all to
Yeah,
admire.
yeah. I had a client that was at a bachelorette party, and then she said, "That guy that walked up and it went, that's what that's what Rand just did now."
I suspect that would make you my junior by several decades at the least. I show you respect. Perhaps it would be appropriate for you to return it. If you wish, you may call me Rand Sedai. I am, so far as I know, the only male Aes Sedai still alive who was properly raised, but who never turned to the shadow. Cadsuin paled visibly. I love that.
So
But
this is the if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, by the way, you gain you go to you're a fighter all the way through the whole thing, and then you get to level 20 and you take 2 points of wisdom. You know,
let me
this
take a
this
couple
is
of
what he
levels of.
did. Yeah.
Let me take a dip into Bard just to be a badass here. So, but then what makes it, as much as I want to be inside Rand's head at this moment, I think what makes it work is that we're not, and so we don't know what he's thinking when as Sanderson says here, Cadsuin paled visibly, and then Rand pulls a Matt here by becoming self-deprecating. Rand's smile turned kindly. You wish to come in and dance with the Dragon Reborn, Cadsuin. I am what I need to be. Be comforted. You face the Forsaken, but have one as ancient as they at your side. He turned away from her, eyes growing distance. Now, if only great age really were an indication of great wisdom. It's like that that lets you know that this is a real transformation. That lets you know that this is not pretend wisdom. That no, this is real wisdom because as I've said before, you go from east to west, from the Greeks to the Indians to the Chinese to the Japanese, keep going across to the Native Americans. Across all those cultures, they had different ways of saying it, but basically, the mark of a wise person is someone who knows what they do not know.
Well, it's
That's what he's
a
exhibiting here.
butchered Socrates statement. He said, "If I were to say what I know is that I know nothing," but I think there was actually a more accurate translation of that from Greek was, what I know is I have more to know, which is much wiser than the first one,
Mhm.
because you know everything you've ever experienced. But what a wise person knows is, I've still got a lot to learn. I don't know everything.
Speaking of a lot to learn, a couple pages later on page 749, you get this nice back and forth between Rand and Min, and Rand is trying to allay Min's fears of, hey, I'm still me. Yeah, I'm also him, but
But him is me.
him is me.
Yeah.
So I suppose I am him, but Min, what you're missing is this. I may be him now, but he was always me as well. I was always him. I'm not going to change just because I remember. I was the same. I'm me, and I always have been. Luce Theron was mad. At the end, Rand said, and yes, he made mistakes. I made mistakes. I grew arrogant, desperate. But there's a difference this time, a great one. What difference? He smiled. This time, I was raised better.
Oof. Oof. As a dad, that one hits. Yeah.
That one hits, and we only get hints of this from a little bit from Luce Theron's flashbacks and some of his ramblings, and then a little bit in some of Rand's flashbacks in Ruidine in book 4, where you go all the way back to the beginning and you get the previous person in his lineage thinking about how he wished he had been able to channel. He wished he'd been chosen, and he has this thought about the Aes Sedai coming through to test people early on. I get the impression from the little bit of hints that we get that in the Age of Legends, the Aes Sedai were much like super nerd reference here, the Old Republic Jedi,
Hmm.
which I didn't know until I forget who I heard mention this recently, is that one of so there's a lot of Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism in the Force and in the Jedi, but one of the inspirations for the Jedi Order were actually the Franciscan orders. These very reserved, ascetic monks who denied the attachments of life in order to dedicate themselves to this higher ideal. And you get a hint of that in the prequels, where young Anakin is like 10 years old and he's too old. Like, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah. So let's analyze this from the situation itself. There are qualities that make a good leader, right? And some of those, because genetics isn't everything, but it's more than everything else, uh, were there from birth. But who was his mother and father, right? His father was a clan chief, and his mother was a princess, basically. So
Queen, I
you
think.
queen.
Yeah, I think she was queen. I think Tigraine was queen.
Okay, so yeah, when she left, her husband was the king, and he married Morghese, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the genetic traits that made them what they were, but raised in a farmhouse by a soldier. And so genetics aren't everything, but they're more than everything else. But if you take those traits and you put them in an environment where they have to maximize, you get Rand. Where in the court, in the structure that Elaine is in, which is why we're annoyed about Elaine, is she had all the genetics, but she was not maximized because she was basically sheltered for most of her life.
Well, and then uh, uh, first of all, I just looked her up. She was the daughter heir, but she was the only child, and that's what led to the succession when Morghese took the throne. Is because then when the queen died, there was no heir, so she wasn't
Okay.
queen yet. Um, so
But at the same time, the same genetics were there. It's the same people,
yes.
right? Yeah.
All right. So now turn that up to 11, because um Elaine didn't leave the palace until she was a teenager, until she was almost a woman. If I'm right in the impression I get from the Age of Legends, you were taken as a child, as a prepubescent child. that the moment the spark or the ability to channel was detected, the Aes Sedai took you to start training you,
Hmm.
which meant you didn't grow up in a normal mother, father, siblings household. You grew up in the tower, or what was the equivalent of the tower at the moment. That is seriously going to affect who you were. And I think that's the point Rand slash Jordan slash Sanderson is making here, which is that it's important that he grew up in a community with people and a father who raised him with a core set of values and around people who reinforced those values.
Well, and this goes with my thesis on movement is you look at the difference between Elaine Gawain. Gallad is different because I'm going to put him on as an outlier because he was actually semi-rejected by his mother or by his stepmother.
Mm.
So he was basically the redheaded stepchild without being redheaded, you know? Uh, and he was
Well,
always trying to gain that approval
yeah,
through
and
following
Morgase
the
has this
rules. Yeah.
thought in those scenes where Galad first says, "Holy crap, mom," and in that scene, then from her point of view, she has that thought of, "I tried to make sure he was part of the family, but I don't know that I did enough."
Yeah, and you see through his thoughts that she actually didn't,
Yeah.
you know. But so he was organically trying to be accepted where the other two were automatically accepted.
Mhm.
And so we see with Rand, he went through the organic process, even though he has the same genes. So what I talk about with movement is when you try to structure something that is supposed to be proper movement at too young of an age, you end up having dysfunction because the mind can't separate what I am doing in my environment from what I'm supposed to be doing.
So this is why I like having these discussions, is because I so often is because it's not a monologue, it's a discussion. And that's why we sometimes have, oh, I just thought of this thoughts, even though just thought of this. We've been reading this freaking series for almost 30 years now. You coming
Yeah,
because you
and this is
started in
also
like
my
96,
PhD
97.
thesis
Yeah.
when it comes
But
to movement. So,
but
yeah.
so we've been going back and forth, and I've got notes here, and I was just reading this and thinking, and yet it didn't occur to me that that's why the end of the previous book of A Gathering Storm wasn't as satisfying, and I think it's because the reason it kind of felt out of nowhere is I think Sanderson needed to do a better job connecting why Rand has this epiphany, why he decides the world is worth fighting for, is because he was raised better.
Hmm.
We needed a connection there. We needed some thought that connected Rand in that moment back to Tam and the Two Rivers.
Yeah, and I think that's a personality type on Sanderson's part too. He's probably very organized. He might even be a little autistic. Uh,
I'm from
yeah,
the bits of interviews and stuff I've seen. Yeah, probably.
yeah, yeah. So I don't think he can envision a world where things happen organically. So he has trouble writing that, which is why he
Mm,
had so much trouble writing Matt,
mm,
is
mhm.
because Matt is completely reactionary to his surroundings in the best possible way. Uh, Not getting triggered by it, but actually saying, okay, this is the situation now. How do I adapt to it? And I don't think Sanderson has a mental backdrop for that, where I think Jordan did because of a different generation. Really, he was at Vietnam. You think everything went according to plan in Vietnam? Actually, very little. Very little went according to plan at Vietnam. So I think he lived in a world where you adapt to survive. And Sanderson lived in a world where probably he was subject to helicopter parenting because I'm just thinking of age right now and the way he acts. So he probably, because he's a few years younger than us, and that was when that kick really started. Uh, and so he expects things to be a certain way, and so he writes it that way. Uh, it's not his fault. I We complain about his writing a lot, but it's not his fault. It's a generational thing, and I wish he had the experience that Jordan had, but at the same time, he wouldn't have the experience of writing things
Yeah.
as long because
Yeah.
he was so young when he took this project on. Well, he was mid 30s, lower 30s.
Yeah, we've looked this up before, and I'm pretty sure he was in his 30s of Sanderson is he's a little bit older than us. He was born in 75.
Oh, well, yeah, he is a little bit older. He's more my brother's age.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But I
So
guarantee you he didn't live homeless or anything like that. Like, you know.
while I'm thinking about it, to your point about things in Vietnam not going right, this was a guy I've talked about before. Go watch this recent video from the Fat Electrician. Have you ever heard the name Roy Benavides?
No, no, no.
He's from around Victoria, so not from
Oh,
your neck of the woods down there.
I
And
like Victoria. Victoria's actually nice.
this dude, he looks gigantic because he has no neck. He but he's only like 5'7", 5'8".
I was about to say he's probably like 10% body fat because he's in the Green Berets at the moment.
But
Yeah.
uh he almost got rejected because he was too small, and they told him, because when he went into the recruiter's office, the army recruiters told him, "Yeah, go see if the Marines will take you." And he said, "No, I came here to join the army," because his hero was Audie Murphy, who, in a bit of hilarious historical irony, was rejected from the Marines because he was too short. And he was Audie Murphy's from Texas, and after World War II, he went into the Texas National Guard, and he was Roy Benavides' hero. And Benavides basically was another, here comes another Texican kid to show what's what. And his Medal of Honor story is just bonkers. In everything went awful and he refused to give in. The guy should have been dead like 5 times during this moment, and nope, he's just going to keep going. And it's even if he himself, Jordan himself, didn't live that, he lived around those people. He personally knew those kinds of people, the kind of people who are only alive because they or somebody else said, no, not today. And they kept fighting. And it's not it's something you can know, but I don't think it's something you can understand. Much to your point about pain, I brought this up. I don't remember if it was a Wheel of Time thing or talking about something else, but hearing a tornado for the first time.
Oh
I
gosh.
I
Oh
had seen tornadoes because I lived in
yeah.
Oklahoma.
My dumbass
So,
went out with
yeah.
yeah.
And when you see it, that in and of itself is terrifying, but I'd never been close enough to hear one. And it said, well, it's like a freight chain. It's not. It is a very bizarre, unique sound that is impossible to describe. It's just, it when you hear it and you go, oh crap, honey, get the kids and go to the bathroom. It was scary as heck to know it was that close. And this was, for anyone who doesn't know, I've referenced this before, the F5 tornado that hit Joplin was that close to us. And
Mm.
and when you hear it, it is otherworldly and terrifying. And in much the same way that what Jordan went through is, you can listen to the stories, you can hear people talk about it after the fact, but even if he didn't go through it himself, he was there when it was happening, which to me means he had a level of understanding that the overwhelming majority of people never will. And whether he, to his point in that first interview I brought up from the wiki page of interviews, and he made the point of, look, I don't think that me being a combat vet impacts the action. It impacts the mentality of how does someone who has seen combat before, what do they think about it both before and after? And you get that here with Rand in this moment of, this is someone who has seen some shit.
The
And
top right, that's my uncle. Joe, he was a Green Beret.
That's a quality mustache there, sir.
That is a quality mustache, and
I'm sorry. You're
he actually
not sir.
looks.
You're a senior NCO.
Yeah,
My bad.
he looks a lot like my dad did, which is George Costanza meets Phil Collins, realistically.
That is the mustache of a senior NCO. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Uh, but he actually is my savior when it comes to my straight nose, because the first time I broke my nose, he was around and he stuck a pencil up there and put it back in place. He said, "You got to keep that thing straight, son." And okay, all right, we'll do that. But yeah, it's a different kind of people, and this is where Sanderson falls short. And this is where I talk to younger people, especially when I'm back in school, because the average age that I'm in class with is like 25, is experience matters.
Mm.
Experience does matter, because you can be as smart as a whip. You could have 150 IQ, but if you've never experienced anything, you can't identify with anything.
That leads me to my next point, my next note here, which is on page 750, is, I hadn't thought about it in these contexts, but I made the note for a different reason, and you just made me go, yeah, that again, I don't think it's an accident that Rand is the one who thinks this. So as they're writing forward, Cadsuin is giving him advice on how to deal with these Borderlander leaders. And Rand is the one who recognizes and points out this, which is so I had made this point because I had forgotten this part. I had forgotten why the Borderlanders came south. And it's actually really damn good writing on Jordan's part, and a very satisfying reveal. Because from the very beginning, when we first see the Borderlanders, it's in an epilogue. I don't remember which book. It's in an epilogue, and you go, what the heck are the Borderlanders doing down here? Why are they so far away from the Borderlands? That's not like them. And then you find out, oh, it's because of a secret prophecy that the Shinarans have been holding
Mm.
close to their vest. And you go, but you just made me realize that, all the layers that are happening here. And one of those layers is it's Rand who recognizes and points out to Cadsuin, who he just pointed out, Cadsuin, I'm several decades, if not a full century older than you are. So maybe stop it with the boy stuff. Okay. Because he's the one who points out there is more to it than that, Cadsuin Sedai. Rand replies, his voice hushed. Something drove them southward. This is a challenge, one I am uncertain how to meet, but your advice is appreciated.
No. This is actually good, because
Yeah.
he's acknowledging that, because he's stating that he has decades more experience than she does, but then he's also acknowledging that she has more experience in this moment of time
Mm-hmm.
than he does. So he's like, okay, here's my experience with dealing with these kind of people from my memories of Lews Therin and everything before that. But culture has changed in 3,000 years.
And so adding to the layers here, he doesn't know what's going on. And so therefore he's not sure how to deal with it. But then his instincts for dealing with it, when these monarchs literally slap him across the face. Tenobia so hard that she's shaking her hand afterward. Acer slaps him so hard he falls to the ground and blood comes flying out of his mouth like a slow-mo Rocky movie, right? And his instinct is, everybody stay calm. And he's going to stand up and say, what the hell are you doing here? What is going on? Because if you wanted to kill me, you would have killed me. So why the heck are you doing this? What is this game? So his instinct is to try and diffuse and understand the situation.
Yeah, well, we see parallels here, because we know Jordan brought a lot of religion into the books. That's the washing of the feet moment. Uh, uh, the Buddha had similar moments where he would be attacked and just stand in the face of it. It's the turn the other cheek, is what it is, ultimately.
There's a better moment than that, actually.
Oh,
Hold on. No,
well,
stop
it's
it.
parallel.
Be
I mean,
quiet.
yeah, it's parallel. It's not exact, but it's parallel.
And I don't know if Ridley Scott understood this when he did it. I'm going to mute it here so we don't get a stupid copyright
Yeah,
strike.
I'm going to
But
assume he did because I like to make the assumption that these people are smarter than me when I look at these things.
turn the other cheek moment, and I've ranted before, as you know, the Christian here, of how I think that has been horribly misused. But did you ever see the movie Kingdom of Heaven? I
The
liked
movie
it.
Kingdom of Heaven, which one is
Yeah.
it? No, because
Orlando Bloom and
oh,
Liam
that's on my
Liam
list. Okay,
Neeson is his
okay.
Orlando Bloom is the bastard son of Liam Neeson, who has become a Templar, and he's going back to the Holy Land, and he wants to find this bastard son to make amends, to make repentance, blah blah blah,
Oh,
and
yeah, I have seen this movie. Okay, yeah.
and then on the way to the Crusades, he is mortally wounded, and so one of his last acts is to have his bastard son take the oath as a Templar, take the oath as a noble, because now you are my heir. And I love this moment where he has him repeat the oaths of a knight, and repeat the oaths of a Templar. And the oath itself is great, but what is so telling about this scene, and this is true. This is how oaths were given, is that uh after he says the oaths, after he hands over his signet ring, whack, and he slaps him across the face. Why? As Liam Neeson says, in the great freaking Liam Neeson way of, and that is so you remember.
One of the crying shames of the prequels to Star Wars is they obviously told Liam Neeson to talk this way,
Yeah.
and it was so unnatural that it was
Yes.
horrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he is so great in that moment as someone who is dying. And I have heard that uh the director's cut is like a full 45 minutes to an hour longer, and it's a totally different movie, and I keep meaning to try and find it and watch it. But I love that moment of, words aren't enough.
Hmm.
I'm gonna slap you across the face so that you remember it, so it's
Well,
real.
we see this across cultures with rites of aging, basically.
Mm.
You go out and you kill the lion, right? You go out and you kill the lion or you're nothing. Because to say I am brave enough to defend my village is one thing, but to go out and kill a lion, you have put action on top of words.
and
Otherwise, you're dead.
in this moment that happens here, and they don't understand how much danger they were in, these four monarchs. And Rand tells them a month ago, the first time I came here to see y'all, if you had done this, I would have burnt you to where you stand. And they say that was a risk we were willing to take, and not wrongly, because as the prophecy says, if he was in the mindset he was a month ago, he can't go face the dark one, or a victory for the light would be every bit as bad, if not worse. Better that he dies here and we go into a cycle of terribleness, and hopefully come out on the other end with a different, with a new, with a better avatar of the light to face the dark one. Because this guy, if this one wins, it won't be a win, it will just be a different victory for the dark. And so they were willing to cut him down, to kill him, if he could not answer this question, because it would signify that he is not the avatar of the light, he is the avatar of something else. And they were willing to take that chance because it mattered that much.
Which is funny. It might be in the other video where we break down the debate. But I was talking about 80s Trump versus 90s Trump versus what we have
Now,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, well, which one's the better one? But then they put these rules on him for this debate, and he was completely different than he was in 2020. So it's like, well, where are we at? We can't see in his mind. We don't have the luxury of reading a book where we can
Mhm.
see inside their mind.
Mhm.
Where are we at right now is the big decision, right? And where we were at 2 books ago with Rand was exactly what you said. it will destroy the world because it was full of anger and vengeance and ice
And
cold
arrogance,
psychopathy.
just brimming with arrogance. Yeah.
Yeah, ice cold psychopathy, where he could look somebody in the eye who's desperate and still burn them to cinders because they were the bad guy or whatever, right? Uh, and now he's in a different place where he can look you in the eyes and see your soul. We saw that with him identifying the Dark Friends
Yeah.
not that long
Yeah.
ago, right? So he has gained a level in the proper direction.
Mhm.
But to your point, had this happened before, this would be an army of dead people.
So there's this great moment here. We have switched to Cadsuan's point of view. Uh, after the slapping, and they say, well, let's sit down and talk about this. And Rand says, um, here it is. Uh, down at the bottom of page 754. You don't know how close you came to doom, Rand said softly. If I had come to you but a short time earlier, I'd have returned those slaps with balefire. Inside the Guardian, Tenobia sniffed disdainfully. Ah, yes, only person here with more arrogance than Rand. The Guardian blocks the one power, Rand whispered. The one power only. What does he mean by that? Cadswin thought, frowning. Even Cadsuan doesn't know about the true power, and it's probably good that she doesn't, or she might just kill Rand here
Yeah,
on
he
general
hasn't reached he
principle.
hasn't reached the point where he's got the saw coming around his eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, we knew well the risk, Atheniel said proudly. You didn't, but kudos to you for being willing to face it anyway. But really, the best part about the Cadsuan point of view here is actually up at the top of this page when he's sitting down with them, and Cadsuan, her thought is there are 13 Aes Sedai standing outside, and he doesn't care. What the hell? And she has this thought, he's changed, Cadsuan told herself. You're just going to have to accept that. Um, that's why she's so great. That's why she is such a compelling character, even though we only met her a short time ago relative to the length of the series. It is because, oh, she gets it. And she's not, it's not that she's perfect. It's not that she doesn't have the biases and arrogance that someone in her position would and should have. It's that she's not bound by them. And that's why she's so great.
Which is important when you judge your hosts here, because I am the more open-minded one of us, by the way.
Yeah, well, put a pin in that and deal with it later. Well, that's all I have on notes for this. Like I said, I wanted to get into 52, but 52 is Elaine and then Perrin out of nowhere, and then it ends with the beginning of Matt going to the Tower of Genji. And I thought, you know what? Let's not end in the middle of a chapter. Let's just try and go through to the end. And I assume we're going to, as we often do, have quite a few thoughts on Sanderson writing Matt, which is most of what the end of the book is. So let's take some time to deal with that next time.
Yeah, my problem with that is, and I'll kind of leave this as a cliffhanger for the next time, is I think Jordan went too far in making the Genji plot Matt's thing because it uh it created a level that wasn't necessary. Because Matt was being built up as the general and all these things,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden we have a solo quest, realistically.
It should have been more of a Tom thing than a Matt thing, and a way to bring us back to Tom, who we really haven't had a lot of time with since the first several books.
Yeah, and it was necessary to get Matt where he needed to go with his going and getting hung and all of those things, which
Yeah.
is why he's the one for the
So
job with Tom.
in a way, it's the end of his story because it's
Mhm.
the end of the arc that began at the beginning of book 4 when he first went through the doorway, and now we kind of come to the end of that. But it's done through this mechanism that is rescuing Moraine, which should be more of a Tom thing.
Yeah, which I think again started back with Jordan was he wanted the main point of Perrin to be his becoming a leader and Matt or no, he wanted the main point of Perrin getting into his own with his own personality. But he wanted Matt to be become a leader, but then he crossed it over for a subplot on both sides, where Perrin becomes more the leader and less the wolf, and Matt becomes more the I'm helping Tom, I'm saving Moiraine, I'm doing all these things on an individual level, when his plot point from the beginning was to become a leader. So it was a crossing of streams.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
say
yeah. That's a good
Ghostbusters,
point.
don't cross the streams, don't cross
It
the streams.
this feels like a moment, like an adventure that should have happened in the first 5 or 6 books.
Or just been consistent where Perrin was the one involved with the individual quest, and Matt was more involved with the leadership quest.
Yeah.
And you could have reduced it by 4 books, maybe, by
Yeah.
by not
Well,
crossing those streams.
well, speaking of that, I didn't have any spoiler thoughts except for kind of a meta idea, which is I have made a text document for, because I brought up last time or the time before that we might have to do an epilogue or 2 or 3 or 5 episodes when we're finally done with the story of big unanswered questions. Because one of the ones that came up here in this last chapter was Min looks at Rand and she notices he's no longer dealing with the sickness that he used to have when embracing and then the source and then channeling. And so that leads to the thought of what exactly caused it, and so why is it done? But I thought, you know what, let's put a pin in that and leave that, because that spans a number of books. And so Scott, Isomorphic, anyone else who's out there listening, if you have any of these in all caps, or put epilogue and then whatever your thought statement or question is of things that we should talk about when we're done here, of storylines that you think aren't complete, or questions that need to be fully explored, or whatever, these kinds of things that span multiple books. And we can spend some time when we're done looking back and saying, okay, now that we're all done here, what was that? What was that thing? How did that end? Why did that happen? Those kinds of questions. I've got some epilogue questions spinning around in my mind. So if anyone else does, all caps epilogue, and then your comment, and then I'll add it to the document there. And then when we're all done, we'll try and do some deeper dives on these kinds of questions.
That sounds perfect to me. Anything else before we close it up?
No, that's just it. That's it. And then again, you're going to be out of town for a while, so there probably won't be any episodes next week, except things that are scheduled to release
We could
later.
probably
But
do it on Saturday again next week,
okay.
because we fly in Friday. So,
All right. So if things work out, then next Saturday we will finish up with Towers of Midnight.
all right, awesome. All right, later, guys. Like, subscribe, all those good things.